The penultimate episode of Silo Season 2 is here, and I think this could well be the best episode we've had this season. I'm so glad it happened right before the finale because it has been set up so well. We see Bernard with literally nobody left on his side, learn the emotional and tragic backstory of Solo, uncover the identity of the three people who attacked Solo and Jules, and discover the tunnel at the bottom of the silo that Lucas Carl found from Salvador Quinn's node. There's so much to unpack from this week's episode, so let's dive in and break down everything there is to take away from it. Here's Silo Season 2, Episode 9, Ending Explained. Just a heads up, this video contains spoilers. One of the critical minutes in this episode rotates around Lucas Carl and the deciphering of the letter Salvador Quinn abandoned. We saw that he figured out how to translate a greater amount of it, driving him to peruse the words, "Go to the lower part of the storehouse, find the passage, you will get affirmation." This became an integral factor toward the episode's end. Lucas advanced toward where George and Jules frequently went for their heartfelt excursions. He arrived at the resolution that the water underneath them might not have been that profound, so the passage he was searching for might have been available. When Lucas made it down to the water, he coincidentally found a passage, and a voice addressed him, saying, "Lucas Carl, what are you doing here?" It then uncovered that main three individuals had at any point been there: Salvador Quinn, who might have been a long time back, Mary Glades, who was beforehand the adjudicator, meaning she certainly realized more than she was letting on, and George Wilkins. The voice then warned Lucas that if he told anyone about their conversation, the safeguard would be initiated, a cryptic threat that clearly left him uneasy. This warning may help explain why Judge Meadows never shared what she knew about the tunnel or the truth she uncovered. Instead of speaking out, she took matters into her own hands, physically venturing into the tunnel herself. The revelation she encountered seemed to have a profound effect on her, especially considering her descent into a drinking problem. It's possible that the weight of the truth she discovered about the silo system or the larger conspiracy drove her down that dark path. Her growing dependence on alcohol could be seen as a coping mechanism, an attempt to dull the emotional and mental strain that came with uncovering such a reality. This newfound knowledge also likely contributed to her distancing herself from Bernard. Whatever information she stumbled upon clearly altered her worldview, shifting the way she interacted with those around her and ultimately changing the way she chose to live her life. This makes me wonder about the effect it will have on Lucas Carl as well. After hearing whatever information he's about to uncover, it's hard to predict how he will act moving forward. We don't know exactly what the safeguard entails, but it's likely something significant, something on a large scale, potentially too dangerous for him to take lightly. The nature of the threat could be enough to make anyone reconsider the consequences of sharing sensitive information, especially if it puts those they care about at risk. One could infer that the safeguard might involve a plan to harm or even destroy the silo itself, an extreme measure that would make anyone hesitant to challenge the status quo. This becomes especially concerning given the silo's isolated nature and the tight control over the flow of information between different silo communities. If such a safeguard is meant to silence dissent or suppress certain truths, its reach could be far more devastating than anyone might anticipate. The whole idea of people not knowing what the outside world is truly like, some believing it's a paradise, others thinking it's a barren wasteland, is what keeps people inside. They don't know the full truth. If Lucas Carl starts revealing the truth and the information he uncovers, maybe the silo system itself could be compromised. There's an important piece of dialogue that almost went unnoticed. When Lucas Carl said to Bernard that there were 50 silos, Bernard corrected him, stating that there were 51, but he didn't know why. This seems to suggest that there are 50 silos that essentially mirror each other, and this extra one could act as a central hub, overseeing and monitoring the others. This could be why there's a tunnel at the bottom of every silo, allowing access whenever necessary. The central silo could be the one making the key decisions for the entire system. Every silo, except for the head of each one and their shadow, believes they are the only ones in existence, thinking the outside world is destroyed. They don't know of any other silos, and the central silo could be observing them like ants, studying their behavior over time and seeing how they respond to different stimuli. Lucas Carl is about to uncover the truth, the very thing that Salvador Quinn wanted someone to learn. Unlike Meadows, whose life was tainted by the truth she uncovered, I think Lucas Carl will take action with the information. He expressed regret to his mother for not acting when Jules came to him seeking help, and this time, I don't think he'll just sit by and do nothing. When it comes to Solo's true identity, I'll admit, I welled up a little during the backstory. There were two key moments: the revelation that Solo had to watch his father be killed because he refused to open the vault door, a decision his father made to ensure his survival, and the moment when he put his hand on Jules, showing a clear sense of care between them. The story of Jules being in Silo 17 reached its crescendo in this week's episode, and it was orchestrated perfectly. We got to see the perspective of three individuals: Eric, Ander, and their experience from the moment Jules entered Silo 17 to where she was faced with an arrow from Audrey. They were offspring of survivors of the rebellion. Two of their parents were actually killed by Solo. Tess was Rick's mother, and Chase was Audrey's father. They went on a quest to get inside the vault, something they managed to achieve by working through a set of different codes. These codes were written on the wall that Jules erased a few episodes back because she didn't know what the numbers were. It was when their parents made it into the vault with a successful code that they shot Solo while he was asleep and took some food. However, Solo woke up, and then he proceeded to drain the air from the room, causing them to suffocate. This is why both Audrey and Rick had a deep-seated vendetta against Solo. They viewed him as a cold-blooded murderer, completely unaware of the complex and tragic circumstances that shaped his actions. Their hatred for him was rooted in what they perceived as a betrayal, but they never took the time to truly understand the full story. Jules, on the other hand, took a different approach. In this episode, she went full detective, unraveling the mystery behind Solo's past and piecing together the key details. Through her investigation, Jules discovered that Solo was not just some rogue figure but the head of IT and the son of Russell Conroy, a revelation that shocked everyone. It turned out that Solo's real name was Jimmy Conroy, and he was only 12 years old when the rebellion took place, a fact that added another layer of heartbreak to his already tragic backstory. At such a young age, Solo had to witness the death of his father, an event that profoundly shaped the person he would become. This moment tied back to the very first episode, when we saw the sheriff nervously rubbing the blood off his face, remarking that things had escalated. What he meant by that statement became painfully clear as we learned more about Solo's childhood. Solo was a child when the rebellion occurred, and much of his behavior throughout the series stemmed from the trauma he experienced during that pivotal moment in his life. After witnessing his father's brutal death, Solo retreated into a world of isolation, holding on to his father's final words and his belief in the mission they had both shared. For years, he stood by those principles, unwilling to let go of the past, afraid that if he did, he would dishonor his father's memory. He never communicated with anyone during this time, which explains why, despite the passing years, he still retained the tone of voice and emotional maturity of a 12-year-old boy. This prolonged isolation, coupled with his inability to move beyond the trauma of his childhood, left him emotionally stunted, unable to form meaningful connections with those around him. The fact that he had to shoulder such a heavy burden at such a tender age explains a lot about his troubled mindset and his seemingly erratic behavior later on. Solo went through a lot, and I felt deeply emotionally connected to him when he was telling his backstory. He was a traumatized boy protecting the vault because his father told him to. He watched his father die for it, then witnessed his lifeless body being dragged away in front of him. Honestly, what a poor kid. We actually saw why Solo knew of a lot of different things, such as elephants, circus music, and many things not everybody else knew. This was because he had access to all of the information that Bernard had inside the vault in his silo. Jules also found another suit when she was looking to decipher the code for the vault. This was inside Russell Conroy's apartment. However, she didn't take the suit and run. Instead, she did what she could to make sure that Solo survived, showing that she cared for him. Their journey together in this season has had its ups and downs. He saved her life several times, and I think her not leaving and abandoning him was her returning the favor. It's definitely going to be sad watching them say goodbye to one another, and I hope this isn't the end for them. Bernard is now on his own. Oh, Bernard, you have a small but definitely playing to find out if she's the rat. The plan that you think is going to happen most probably isn't. Bernard started this season with Meadows, Sims, and the sheriff. He also adopted Lucas Kyle, but this episode showed us that he no longer has any allies and is, in fact, on his own. Lucas Kyle was the shadow to the head of IT, but with Bernard not giving him the time of day when he needed him, we saw that Lucas Kyle went off on his own. Hence, he ended up finding the tunnel and associating with Shirley and the people from the lower levels. He was friends with Juliet, and him being back down there, hoping to find the truth, showed that he was now back on side with them. Paul Billings was continuing to question his position and why he was chosen to be the sheriff. We saw that he realized it was because he was someone who would fall in line and carry out orders like he was a puppet, not because he was a firm, strong leader. His wife, Kathleen, is also looking to seek the truth about the world outside and whether it was still like that. I think this is something that could be detrimental. I actually think we're going to see a mirror effect like what happened with Allison and Holston in Season 1. Patty Kennedy was telling her about what Allison said when she said that the display is a lie and that the world outside might look like the picture that Billings has. I feel she could grow obsessed, just like Allison did, and it could become an infection in her mind that won't be able to be cured until she steps foot outside and sees it for herself. That could make Paul Billings even more of a broken man and resent the silo even further, cementing himself on the side of the lower levels. Sims even turned on Bernard completely by allying with Billings after he was shown that very same image of what the outside world once looked like. He and Camille were now planning to go into the server room to see what was truly behind the door that was gate-kept by Bernard. Bernard has a war coming towards him on all fronts, and only Aranson is there alongside him. Billings, Sims, and KNX are coming at him from all angles, and he's not going to be able to defend them all. KNX said in this episode that he knew who the rat was amongst the people of the lower levels. Prior to him going to Martha to reveal to her that he believed it was Teddy's mother, she was actually feeling guilty over what had happened. KNX made out to Walker that the leftover gunpowder from the supplier was going to be used in the next plan that gets carried out. I think this is definitely a decoy, and he's revealing this information to only her to see if preparations get made in order to defend against an attack that won't happen. This will change the dynamic of Mechanical completely, and the thing with Mechanical is they always look out for one another. So, she could be in for a very uncomfortable ride moving forward where she becomes an outcast. My review of Silo Season 2, Episode 9, without a doubt, this was the best episode of the entire season. The pacing was impeccable, and despite the episode being about an hour long, it felt like it flew by. I was completely engrossed from start to finish, as there were so many game-changing revelations that tied back to events from previous episodes, creating a much deeper understanding of the narrative. Each new reveal felt like a piece of the puzzle falling into place, and honestly, my head was spinning with all the new information. One of the standout moments was the first part of the episode, where we got to see Juliet's experience in the silo through the eyes of 3 new characters. This perspective shift was crucial in connecting so many dots about the mystery of her situation. It helped clarify important moments, like why Juliet was saved when she fell into the water and the mystery behind the rope being cut. These details that were once ambiguous now made sense, and I couldn't help but be impressed by how well everything was tied together. For me, Solo stole this episode again. He's become one of my favorite characters on the show, and as I said earlier, some of his scenes made me feel quite emotional. Seeing the growth of the character, going from someone who couldn't trust anybody to then allowing several people inside the vault, felt like such a progression. He was a transformed character. He went through some serious trauma that impacted him decades later, but Jules helped him overcome it. In a silo that was riddled with death, a new life was found, and I think there's beauty in that. I actually don't have any complaints about the darkness of this episode. Even the scenes in Silo 17 didn't feel as dark as they have been, so I have no qualms with the visuals. With us finding out that there's essentially a higher power, and what looks like a main player in watching all of the 50 other silos, that makes things a whole lot more interesting moving forward. I do wonder whether or not Jules will make it back to Silo 18 by the end of the next episode. I hope she does, because it would make things even more difficult for Bernard with there being 2 suits in Silo 17. I also wonder if Ira is going to go with her and find a new life in Silo 18. I kind of want that for the character because Audrey treated her so poorly. She deserves a chance at a new life. With only one episode to go until season 2 concludes, I'm excited to see how the season is going to end and just how eventful the finale will be. So, there you have it, Silo Season 2, Episode 9, Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos breaking down Silo Season 2, click on the card in the top corner. There's a playlist there, or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.